Welcome to another Dungeon Masters Guild Community Jam. Thank you for joining us. Folks in chat are already asking some really great questions. If this is your first time joining a community jam, welcome. Today we are going to be talking about collaborative D&D projects. So you may have seen anthologies or different types of guides or collections of player options where a bunch of folks have collaborated together. That is the type of project we are talking about today. I am your host, Lysa Penrose. I'm the brand manager for Dungeon Masters Guild, but I'm joined with two folks who I have heard so many awesome things as organizers and designers. So let's start off with some introductions. Let folks know who you are, what projects they might know you from, solo or collaborative. And we'll start with Ashton.
Okay, so I'm Ashton. I use she, her. You might know me from the Princess Project, which I was the project manager on. I'm also on a host of other things. I'm also senior producer at Roll20.
Awesome. And Bridie?
Hi, I'm Bridie. I was project manager for Eyes Unclouded. Other than that, I have one solo adventure that was written as part of the RPG writers workshop, and I helped out on the Wombat project last year, which I've totally now forgotten the name of, for charity. Other than that, I own and run the Secret Cat Shop.
Awesome. Oh, hi, Jack, in chat. Thanks for joining us to moderate. But let's go ahead and get started with this conversation. I suppose we should start at the beginning. So my question for each of you is, how did you get started on Dungeon Masters Guild? And we'll go backwards this time. Let's start with Bridie.
So I actually discovered Dungeon Masters Guild after seeing lots of stuff about the first Uncaged book, so a different collaborative project. So I saw that, I bought that, I loved it, and then discovered that I could write my own stories for it, and then, as I said, joined the RPG writers workshop, which helped me a lot with my first project and also introduced me to a lot of people that were doing the same thing, which is really great.
Awesome. What about you, Ashton?
So I started with a solo project based in the Feywild in, I think, August of 2018. And then I forgot about the DMsGuild for a couple months. Just being honest. I think I dove into collabs with 12 Days of Midwinter, which I got to be an editor on, and was very exciting.
Yeah, so both of you have organized DMsGuild projects. Eyes Unclouded, the Princess project. Was there something, I'm wondering, are you an organizer type personality in general or in career? And is there something different or special about organizing for DMsGuild creators in particular? Ashton, I guess we'll start with you this time.
So, absolutely, project management is something I do professionally, but is also just kind of my I've fallen into it professionally because it is my personality type. I used to be the person who always had their planner in high school, color-coded, sticky notes, etc.
So pleasing.
So this was kind of like the perfect fit for me, but also I think the DMsGuild is so unique because everyone really wants to make the best product possible. And I think actually one of my Roll20 coworkers, Kenton, always says this, but constraint breeds creativity. Mm-hmm. And I think working within like the DMsGuild rule set makes a lot of fun collaborations happen because everyone knows the rules and is also like making a project their own. So like the Princess Project is very different from Eyes Unclouded, but it like warms my heart to hear that Uncaged brought so many people into the fold.
Yeah. What about you, Bridie?
Well, yeah, I run my own business, so I think I'm a pretty good manager. It's going okay. But really with this collaborative project, I'm normally just managing myself, my partner. So this was different in I had a lot of other people, a lot of different personality types, and obviously being on in the UK and a lot of people are in the US, like managing different time zones and stuff as well. But yeah, I totally agree that because everybody's got this great attitude, everybody's also around to help. Even like if you're new to writing stuff for the DMs Guild and stuff, you normally have people in the collaboration who have also done it before and are willing to help out anybody who has any questions and such.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely noticed about the Dungeon Masters Guild as a community of creators, that folks are very ready and willing to help people who are new and like excited to make them like one of us. So that's great to hear that that reflects your experience as well. So let's all put our organizer hats on, and we're going to try to get some actionable advice for you folks here in chat. A reminder that if you have questions in chat, definitely feel free to ask them. I might see that we have that question coming up in our list, and so I might hold it until then, or I might weave them in as we go. So don't be afraid to ask questions with question in all caps at the beginning. That helps me spot those. So my first question is, what should someone consider if they want to start or head a collaborative project? Like, what are things you should think about? And I'll also kind of fold in a question someone asked is like, how do you know when something's better as a solo project versus a collaborative project? And feel free to jump in. I know folks were like super polite and don't want to interrupt the other person.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Okay. So the absolute first thing that I recommend when you are thinking of you have a creative idea in mind, the muses have struck, whatever, is to create a project charter. Even for my individual products, I do this. So you need to know what your project is, who its audience is, what the budget breakdown is, and that should help you decide whether it's solo or not. Because if you're expecting to make a 4,000 word adventure about this, that's probably something you can do on your own, though you might want an editor, you might want commissioned art, etc. In the project charter, I'd also recommend breaking down whether you're commissioning art, buying stock art, whether contributors are going to be paid in lump sum or in royalties or a combination. And knowing all of that before you bring on anyone you're contributing with really helps the process.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And on the other side of things, I think what it's important for people to think about after they've done all their like pre-planning and such is it's not just like the work that you're doing doesn't end with making the product. You've got like marketing and such afterwards. It's really important, especially if people are working for royalties. Like you really want to get your project out there to as many people as possible.
Yeah. So where would you say you've done a charter, or at least given some thought into this project, and you've decided, yeah, I really want this to be a collaboration with folks. Before you even put out like a tweet about submissions or anything like that, what tools, resources, types of communications should someone prepare first? Where should someone start?
Well, like I would start after you've got everything, you've decided it's going to be a collaborative project. You need to like really what I did was just bulk out sort of the project charter with a timeline, the expected timeline, how you're splitting royalties if you're doing that, or how you're paying people. Maybe set up a Trello board. I love Trello for each step, and know when you want stuff to happen, and presumably like names you can put in for when people join. You could just fill that in. I'm talking to that person for that. Yeah.
I think a timeline is a really great point. Knowing your handoffs is so important. Knowing like, okay, so, the whole workflow of the project. So is it going to start with pitches, then first drafts, then is an editor going to look at it? A sensitivity reader? Is that going to be developmental editing? That kind of thing will all help. If you know all of that in advance, it will really help the people you're working with. I think also setting up a space to talk to your fellow collaborators, like Discord. I know a lot of people use Trello very effectively, but I have not been a project manager using Trello. And then just like, if you have expectations, you can then effectively communicate those expectations. So making sure you know what you want out of your contributors.
Absolutely. I guess I have two follow-up questions that have sort of come up in this discussion. One, I wonder if we should define what we mean by a collaborative project. Because, like, Ashton, you just mentioned a bunch of different roles. So I imagine folks can think of certain projects that are solo projects, but you might have an editor or even a developmental editor on that project. What does collaborative project mean to you? And we'll start with Ashton.
So to me, it's going to be something that you are not contributing the sole creative force behind it. So for instance, with the Princess Project, I was like, I really want a project that's talking about princesses, obviously, but like empowering women, talking about like governmental structures. The monarchy is a really easy one to criticize for some reason. Note the American accent. And you know, like where people took that in their pitches was amazing, and it was unexpected, and it made the project what it was. I didn't fully form, you know, it didn't spring from my head fully formed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else to add to that, Bridie?
Not really. I mean, that's basically also what I would think.
All right. Well, then my other follow-up question actually was for you. You mentioned that you really enjoy using Trello. There might be folks in chat who aren't aware of what Trello or similar like organizing type softwares or websites might be. Do you mind explaining that a little bit?
Sure. So Trello is a website where used for organizing. I really use it to put like all of my different parts of a project in. It has little cards that you can add to and drag around and move. So I like to, basically split up. Well, this is the planning stage and the writing, what I might need to do for art and layout and such. I find it really helps me to like see everything on screen to know what is going to need to happen when.
Yeah, I feel like if you're a visual learner, especially things like Trello, where you can have like the physical, or I guess it's not physical, it's digital little like index card that you can drag and drop into different stages is really helpful. If there's a bunch of different sites that folks can use. Trello is a really popular one. I'd say the other really popular one right now is Notion HQ. So if you're thinking that something like that sounds interesting to you, you could check out either of those options. Okay, let's talk about, so you talked about this project charter, and I've actually heard the Princess Project's charter invoked before as an example of one of these. Is that a different resource than, say, like a community agreement or a contract? Or does it grow into one of those? Or is a starting point? And either way, do you all use community agreements or contracts for your projects?
So I definitely use my project charter as the basis for my contracts going forward. But there are things in a contract that are not in the project charter. So I use a contract for all of the projects that I project manage on, just because I think that it is a very clear setting of expectations. Obviously, it's unofficial. It's very unlikely that I'd take anyone to any kind of legal repercussion for it, but it does kind of give a sense of formality and a sense of, I am committing to this work. And if I have reservations about that commitment, I need to voice them now. It's also a good place to put in like ethics agreements. Being honest, I'm not going to be racist on Twitter is a good thing to put in a contract, and outlining what the consequences of something like that might be, whether it's being removed from the project. In that case, it should be being removed from the project, or extending deadlines, etc.
I completely agree. And I feel like, so the example you gave where someone might suddenly start like going off on Twitter with a bunch of these points of view that you don't want associated with your project, it becomes a lot more simple of a process and hopefully straightforward of a process. If you already had a contract that sort of spelled out this situation, you can just point to that and be like, you signed this, and then go forward with whatever the consequences of those actions might be. I'll even say, like, as brand manager, luckily I don't get too many folks who butt heads during collaborative projects, but every once in a while I'll get an email from folks saying, well, they agreed to do this and blah, 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 blah. And 99% of the time when that happens, I ask, did you have a contract in place? And most of the times they did not, although I think most of those people will in the future. It's just, that's always the place I'm going to ask to start. So I recommend it, even if you think this is just like a nice, like little easy collaboration with friends. Bridie, did you want to add to that at all?
I just say that I had two separate documents. One was more like an FAQ of everything that was expected and when it was expected, and then the contract was a different document that people signed. And yeah, our contract mostly dealt with sort of like who owns what, but in the future I definitely use clauses like that, and just in case, and I'm going to work on it to make it a bit more hardy, foolproof.
Yeah. Was there a specific resource either of you used for sort of a like a default starting point for your contract? Do you just like Google writing collaborative contracts, or is there a website that you used?
To be honest, I think ours is based on ones that had been used before. So my partner who helped out with the project was part of Etherich, and he signed a contract for that. So and I think the Uncaged contract has been a basis for a lot of other collaborative projects going forward.
The Princess Projects was also based on Etherich. So thank
awesome.
you to Kat Evans and Alicia from
Yes, so
much for sponsoring our project management.
I mean, I think that's awesome, especially for resources like that, that folks are able to take inspiration from and build on each other's experiences to create those. Let's see. In chat, I think an agreement, even an informal agreement, is a fantastic thing to have on a collaborative project. I don't think I've ever worked with someone where we don't have that kind of thing in place, just so we can tell what kind of project we're in for. Yeah, totally. Let's see. All right. So then we kind of move on to the next step. You have all your like beginning things in place. You're ready to find some people to collaborate with. How do you go about getting submissions?
Well, for mine, to start with, I had a few people that, so part of the, again, RPG Writers Workshop Discord, I've been chatting with people and saying, this is something I'd like to do in the future. And a few people say, hey, that sounds cool. If you actually do it, please let me know. So I had a few people to go to, and then it was my first project and I didn't know who was going to be part of it. So I sort of just put a shout out on Twitter and hoped to get a good group of people who wanted to be a part of it, and was very lucky that I did. I got a great group of diverse people who made amazing adventures. So
that's fantastic. What did you do for the Princess Project?
So once I knew what I wanted from pitches and exactly how many, I wanted 3 editors, I wanted however many layout people, etc. I made a Google form and then put that in a tweet. And then tried to boost the tweet in places that I wouldn't normally go, like not just the the DMs Guild Creative Lounge on Discord, which is kind of my usual like creative hangout spot, but also reaching out on Facebook and trying really like as project manager, it is really your responsibility to get a diverse team. And you'll have to reach out individually if you don't on that first round. So making it easy for yourself by to reaching out to a larger group of people helps.
All right. And then what did you do to choose? So, well, what do you ask for in your submission form?
So I asked for, I think, a 250 word pitch of an adventure, letting them know that it was going to be a 4,000 word adventure. Editors, I asked for a portfolio, artist portfolio, and then layout, I think also portfolio. So I think writers could include their portfolio as well, but really what I wanted to work with new writers particularly. So I never hold it against someone if they haven't made something on the DMs Guild before. And I think for every role on the Princess Project, except maybe layout, there was a new person, at least one. There were, I think, half of the writers. It was their first collab.
That's really amazing. I really love when I see, like, folks tend to go on Twitter and use hashtag DMsGuild, at least as one of their options for looking at, for people to submit to their projects. And I really love when people make a point to encourage folks who haven't published before or who have published but haven't gotten a bestseller medal before and prioritize those folks being involved. That's really lovely to see. Bridie, was there anything in particular that you asked for in your submission form?
Something very similar, sort of if you already have an idea of what you would write. It's obviously, some people do have immediate ideas and some people don't, and so it can be a bit difficult. You don't want to just say, well, these people have ideas, let's go with them, and ignore the people who might take a bit more time but still come up with something amazing. But yeah, similar, just if you have any, not necessarily DM's Guild, but writing you or work that you've done that you can point towards, it's always helpful.
Yeah. Or even if you have like those, I think like Ashton, you mentioned yours was 250 words available for a pitch. Even if you don't have something in your portfolio, use the way you write the pitch to capture your voice. If you write a really compelling pitch, that gives someone something to go off of for your writing. There's actually a question in chat I think we should touch on now. And Bridie, I feel like your input would be really insightful on this one. Don't Be KD says or asks, what are the right circumstances to start creating these kinds of projects with other people? Should you have some projects under your belt first, or should you just jump in and start advertising for collaborators?
Well, I think so as I said, Isaac Cloud was my first sort of big collaboration, apart from doing some little bits of editing for other pieces. So it definitely helps to have an idea of what the whole thing entails, of what just writing an adventure entails. But also if you think you have that and you have this amazing idea that you know people want to do, then don't be discouraged, but you've got to keep with it and put in the work.
Absolutely. Anything to add to that, Ashton?
I think that being in a collab first really, it does help. I mean, the creators of Eat the Rich were on Uncaged, then Princess Project learned from Eat the Rich, and then people who were on the Princess Project have now gone on to do their own collabs. So there is a learning, like there is learning to be had, but that absolutely does not mean that you should be limited. And if you've got a great idea and you've got the time and commitment to get it done, absolutely more power to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry, I was going to say,
please go ahead.
To add to that, you can always reach out to other people that have done collabs before, even if you've not been on one. People are really lovely and helpful and willing to help give advice.
Yes, that community supporting each other. Again, love that. So we've talked about how you get your submissions, what you ask for when you're advertising for submissions. How do you go about choosing once you have a bunch of pitches in front of you? How do you choose who's involved?
So first of all, I look at pitches. By role that I'm looking for. And I try to, I know at that point how many I'm looking for, find some experienced people, and then maybe at least one person who's new, because how do you build community without trying out new people? And then I do think it's important on your pitch document to ask for some demographic information. What pronouns someone uses, if there's anything they want to tell you that will help you make decisions. If there are pitches that are really, really close in quality and one person might be marginalized, it might be better to give them a shot. And that's kind of how I make the decisions about who comes on. And then I always remember who almost made it. And I might reach out to them in the future to be like, hey, specifically, can you apply to this next project that I'm going to be on? Because your last one, it was so good.
Which I feel like in and of itself just would make someone's day, even if they end up being busy or something. So that's very sweet. What about you, Bridie?
I don't really have much to add to that. It was kind of, looking at the pitches and who'd applied, thinking about making what type of group they would make, and making sure, like Ashton said, you've got a good diverse group of people. I was pretty lucky that I wasn't totally swamped with submissions, so I had a good group of diverse people. I didn't really need to turn anybody away, so I was very lucky.
Will be next time. You'll be swamped next time.
Oh yeah. All right. So before we move on to what I imagine are like all the other things that an organizer has to do for the rest of the project, let's pause here and let's talk about the other side of it, like being a collaborator on that project, maybe being the new collaborator on a project. What are qualities of a good collaborator? Speaking as someone who has collaborated on projects before and who has organized projects, what would make you want to work with someone again? And Bridie, we'll start with you.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, definitely good communication is like at the top of there. So when we started Ice Unclouded, we were sort of just around the first lockdown. So we knew we were taking it a bit easy for deadlines not being super strict, allowing people a bit of leeway because things are very difficult and changing a lot of the time. And I think just if you are struggling or you do need a bit more time, just letting people know as soon as you know is communications, I think, top for me.
Yeah, the great value to have in general, I think. What about you, Ashton?
Nothing really to add to that from a collaborator side, but from the project manager side, you can make that a lot easier by being approachable, by giving regular reminders, by coming to people where they are and remembering that not only is it COVID right now, but some people might be homeschooling their kids. Most people are not doing this full time, different time zones, especially if you have a very regionally diverse team. You're going to have different time zones. So setting those expectations early and then communicating them regularly is going to help people communicate to you when they can't meet them so that you can then respond with kindness and flexibility, hopefully.
I feel like that brings us back to that charter that you mentioned, kind of spelling out what you want the culture of the project to be like early on, sets those expectations, like you said. All right. So you've done your prep for your project. You've asked for submissions. You've chosen the people you're going to be collaborating with. What comes next? Is it smooth sailing and you get all your things in and people edit them and it's easy peasy? Or what are some surprises that come up after you have submissions in place?
nobody ever adheres. Like there's always at least one person who does not adhere to the adventure outline. Like you write it, it's very thorough, and then like suddenly there's a sidebar and you're like, where did this come from? Hello? So like regular check-ins is really going to help catch that stuff. I typically go pitch to onboarding, then rough draft writing, developmental editing, and sensitivity reading at the same time, then playtest editing, second draft writing, copy editing, corrections, layout. Yeah.
I think most of those steps seem pretty straightforward, but what is the onboarding step?
Right, so that would be going through the project charter and getting everyone to sign their contracts and then bringing them into the Discord and saying, we officially start on January 21st.
Okay. What about you, Bridie? Were there any surprises in Eyes Unclouded?
So something that I would definitely do different next time that was about halfway through, one of the artists came to me and said, if you need me to do sort of art direction, I will do. And I did, and they were so helpful, and I wish I had thought I had done that from the beginning. Just a little bit of delegation, because you're not great at everything, so having heads of sort of different areas is very helpful. Caused a bit of a hiccup in the middle, but it all came out so much greater at the end, I think.
Head editor is really going to help out too.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that there were certainly, there's writers, there's editors, there are illustrators, but what are roles that are more of like on the administrative side that folks don't always consider for these sorts of projects that are actually really helpful? Like head editor, you mentioned.
Yeah, head editor who's probably going to decide what standards you're following and then what things you're not following specifically in the style guide. Art director is a great thing to add. Layout head, usually, if you're having more than one person do layout. Just like each role that there could be, there probably should be someone in charge of it. And sometimes that should be you. But I always say that for each role, you should have a worst case plan and communicate it to your contributors. So like if a writer says, hey, I can't be in this project anymore, what does their assigned artist or editor do? Do they just not get royalties now because that writer left? Because that's not fair.
Yeah.
If an editor drops, who's going to edit that work? If an artist drops, what's the plan for art? Have a worst case that isn't just the project manager does it. Because I can't draw. I don't know about you, but I cannot.
Yeah, it's definitely it. The worst case scenario should not be that you're going to do it yourself for everything.
What are the options if a writer drops and you don't have time to necessarily then suddenly write an adventure yourself? Do you go back to the submissions? Does that depend on what the timeline left on the project is? What are your thoughts?
Definitely. So I had, again, COVID related, a couple of writers drop out, and so I could do a little bit of moving artists around so that they're on different things, but then was left with an artist with no adventure, and they did a sort of a full piece sort of interior cover, and also some really lovely art for the different tier pages between adventure tiers, which I think was a really good option.
Yeah, that ended up being really beautiful in the layout. We have a nice sort of question that I think integrates well here, so I'll read it out. Geek to Geek Media asks, in terms of the adventure outline you mentioned, is there typically a main person, a designer, a lead writer who writes the overall outline and then passes sections out to other writers for chapters or modules? Or do writers tend to submit outlines and it gets integrated into a primary arc?
Well, I think our projects were all separate adventures, so it was less of a every writer had their own outline and the small adventure to write. So I haven't yet worked on a collaboration where everybody comes together to write one longer adventure.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's definitely a hard mode level collaboration.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Princess Project also was an anthology of unrelated adventures that could be played in sequence. They were a variety of levels and weren't connected narratively. Typically, if I was going to run a project like that, I would bring on, if I wasn't coming up with the overall arc of the narrative, I would bring on a lead writer first to come up with the arc of the narrative before bringing on writers who are going to work under them. Just so, again, setting expectations and making sure that you know the whole scope of the project first.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I think working with like a smaller core group of like narrative designers to figure out what you want that overarching story to be, so you know what those main beats are, and having an outline of those main beats, things that have to happen. And then giving the writers opportunities to write an outline before they write like a whole draft, so that you can then look at that outline and see if that fits as part of your big narrative outline. And if there are any little pieces that need to change, or you forgot that this one, I don't know, part of like this omen that was foretold needs to happen in this chapter or something like that.
You should run a collab, Lysa.
That sounds great. Oh no. Oh no, what have I done? Here's another good question. So we touched on this a little bit, asking where you post for submissions. But thinking of it from the other side, I am not _Twitch wants to know, I'm looking around on the DMsGuild homepage at the moment, was wondering if there's like a forum section or something similar to find people who are up for collabs. So you've talked a little bit about where you post your collabs. Are there specific places you recommend people going if they're interested in looking for other collaborations to work on?
So the Creative Lounge on Discord is a great resource. I think you have to get a invite from a current member, but if you post on Twitter using the hashtag, we're all there too. So someone will surely catch you. It's not to keep people out, for sure. There's a Facebook community, I think, as well, that sometimes has postings for collabs. And again, just the hashtag on Twitter is a great place to find. I think there was even one on Reddit the other day. So anywhere social media is happening around the DMsGuild, there's probably someone looking for contributors.
The RPG Writers Workshop Discord as well. It's a very good place.
Yeah, so many folks get their start on Dungeon Masters Guild through RPG Writer Workshop. And then they've already started creating this network, this other community of theirs for like professional networking. Even if you do this as like a part-time thing and feel like you're just a hobbyist, you're a professional if you're doing it on Dungeon Masters Guild. And then Ashton mentioned the Creative Lounge is an unofficial Discord group. We also have the Drive Through RPG Discord, which is official, that has a section for community content programs, which DMsGuild is a part of. And if you search Dungeon Masters Guild on Facebook, there is a group for creators and then a public page as well. And the hashtag we keep mentioning is hashtag DMsGuild, is very active. All right. Oh yeah, Rage Cage in chat says RPG Writer Workshop is where I found folks for 2 collab projects. So great recommendation there. You mentioned this a little bit, Ashton, with onboarding people onto your Discord. How do you communicate with a large group of collaborators? Do you prefer email? Is Discord your go-to? What do you recommend?
I've never really had a great experience with email because it's so asynchronous and like one at a time. Discord is excellent. You make a channel for each role. You can lock the editor's channel so that they can discuss things in private. You can lock the sensitivity reading channel so they can discuss things in private. Now that you have the ability to thread, it's even better. Like, I feel like it's the best solution for time zones. And you can also pin things. Not that people will check your pins. Project managers, you're going to repeat yourself like a kindergarten teacher, and that's fine. But nobody's going to check your pins on Discord.
What did you use for Eyes Unclouded?
A mix of email and Discord. So the Discord, we had a channel and sort of different channels for each story, and then writing, editing, art. to really separate it out. And but we didn't make it mandatory for people to join. So every like sort of major announcement or check-in I did via email as well.
I think like the combo is good. Like even if you make Discord mandatory, these days, I feel like a lot of times my Discord channels feels like a gotta catch them all thing. I've just realized I can sort them into folders, which has made my life so much better. But Discord is really good for collaborative discussions, and you can have like an announcement section for announcements. But if there's something like you want to make sure people 100% definitely read or can't say they somehow missed, email for those really important messages is really great.
Yeah, I think I did monthly emails now that I think about it. And contracts was all through emails because that's independent.
All right. So you both mentioned that it's very important not to forget that marketing and promotion are something that are going to come up, that are going to be really important, especially if people are working on a royalty system. So how do you go about marketing a large collaborative project like this with both that, like, I don't know if is there an added pressure knowing that royalties are tied to how this project does, and good, and is it different from marketing or promoting your own solo project?
I think so. I think there's an added pressure, but also so what I did was I sort of looked at anywhere that had ever mentioned other collaborative projects like Uncaged before and got names of everybody who'd written about it anywhere. So there is added pressure, but it also gave, like, if I was just doing my own project, I think I'd feel a bit strange emailing people being like, hey, do you want to talk about this? But because it was for so many other people, I was like, the worst they can say is no, so it's fine.
So that's like really, is that more of like the PR side, sort of hunting down writers who've, all right, and reaching out to them to see if they'd want to write about Eyes Unclouded or whatever collaborative project someone else might be working on. What are your thoughts, Ashton?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always worth it to shoot your shot with a reviewer. I know that I was on Friends, Foes, and Other Fine Folks, and we were on Geek and Sundry, and some other projects have gotten press there, and that was really helpful for us. Also, I think there is a much bigger pressure when you are working with royalties, but it's also a lot easier to market. I always talk about when I'm making a solo project, I'm making it for me and my 3 friends. But everyone on your project has 3 friends. And if each of them buy it, it's probably like copper. So like you can feel at least like somewhat successful. But you know, like I think that this is also a place where it's really important to be clear that the value of collaborations is not in its success necessarily. That is nice. But networking and collaborative creativity has kind of its own rewards. And, you know, building a group of people who you trust, that you can play with, that you can write with, is really valuable. And that's been my favorite part of being on the DMsGuild.
So you mentioned that promoting the group projects there's the added pressure, but also a little relief of pressure, the opposite, just because everyone will help sort of market their project because they're excited about it and they want to share what they worked on. Did either of you have a sort of organized like promotion schedule for folks, or a way to distribute graphics? What was that part of project managing like?
So I was going to say, so we had a sort of timeline for when we'd reveal the cover of the book, and then sort of different artworks going up for like a really visual Twitter campaign that obviously, again, yeah, everybody wants to shout about that worked on it, so it does pretty well. And then I tried to get the book done a few weeks before we intended to publish, to be able to reach out to people and ask if they'd like to read it, like to write about it, and being sure to give people enough time to do so, because yeah, they generally have a lot of other stuff as well to write about.
What about you, Ashton?
So essentially the same. We had a strict timeline we were following of like, we're going to release the cover, then it comes out on this date. We were actually right before the pay it forward. So we had a weekend of nothing right before the sale. And everyone was like, oh no. But it was fine. And it all worked out and it was a great project. But there was a weekend of pure terror.
Everyone just was waiting to extra support you.
They were. So I think, that you could be more intense with it, obviously. You could be, trying to really get that SEO, and you could be paying for publicity. But I've found that word of mouth is kind of the best tool on the DMsGuild, and that's only going to come from people who are genuinely excited about your product. And posting in the places where the community already is. Not only will the other people in the community support you, because the rising tide raises all ships, but I'm sure that everyone has noticed the quality on the DMsGuild has just like skyrocketed in the past year. And that's in part from supporting each other and having a larger audience to sell to, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, to add to that, so being part of more a growing number of Discord things now, I think I actually took from Ashton's tweet after the Princess Project. I think you did a breakdown of what's good for project management, and most of these Discord things have a promote your work, show us what you're working on place, which again just grows the number of people who are retweeting and sharing what you're doing, which is really great.
Yeah, so each of these collaborative projects becomes, it's networking, but also making friends, which is lovely. Rage Cage in chat says that Eyes on Clouded marketing was great. I knew I was buying it before it was published. So good job, team.
Oh.
I feel like that's another great resource for Discord as well, rather than if like you have a plan where this is the day we're going to show off the cover, this day we're going to release this art, and so on, rather than emailing people every day or one time with a schedule and all of the graphics attached that they may or may not remember. You can post in Discord every day without annoying people. That's more expected for Discord's mode of communication, and could have a channel where you're dropping what files are releasing each day.
And just what I remembered that we did do that I haven't talked about is we grew an email list. So even if people only see one tweet and then somehow miss the rest, if they really want it, they've put their email down, they're going to get notified when the project's out.
And that's a great resource to have if you ever do like a follow-up anthology, or folks just really love this group of creators. Then now you have other folks that you can market towards. So we've got, like 12 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you if there's any other tips or tricks that you have. But for folks watching live in chat right now, if I haven't answered your question yet, please ask again with question in all caps. And this is the time to ask questions of Ashton and Bridie while we have them. But Ashton and Bridie, did you have any last minute things that I didn't ask you about that you feel like folks absolutely need to leave this conversation knowing?
Touching a bit on what we were talking about earlier about communication being important, and also being as a lead of a project, being someone people feel they can communicate to. It's definitely, especially at the minute where everything's more difficult than usual, I felt it was really important if people were struggling with something just to always ask if there's anything I can be doing to help. So again, work that into your plan of how much work you're going to be doing. There's always going to be extra a little bit to helping people out in any way to keep the project moving forward.
Lovely.
I think bringing that up is so important. I have been on a lot of projects where the project manager doesn't give themselves royalties specifically for the work they are doing as project manager. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be doing probably more work than anyone else individually is doing on their role. So, or you probably should be, depending on how many people are in your project. But like, make sure you're paying yourself. You know, you have limits. You don't need to be available all the time. Setting out the fact that you are not going to be available, you know, on weekends, or, you know, you have a 9 to 5 or whatever. Be aware of your boundaries as well as the boundaries of your contributors.
Great advice. So similar but framed a little differently, a really great question from chat from V. If you could give a new project lead one piece of advice, what would it be?
Mine is going to be like, as I said earlier, delegate. Don't. There's definitely I do it with my business and everything. There's definitely a temptation to be like, okay, this is my project, I'm going to hold on to everything as tightly as possible, but there are most definitely people in your group that you've brought together and you know that can do things probably better than you can. So
What is your one piece of advice, Ashton?
I am an evangelist of the project charter. I yell at everyone that you need a project charter. It doesn't have to be called that. It's called many different things, but just knowing scope, knowing budget, knowing royalties, know all of that before you get too excited and bring people into a Discord and it's not structured and you don't know when the project is starting. You don't want to be in that situation.
Or ending if people don't know when they're going to start getting paid and things.
Exactly, yeah.
I will say that, so Ashton and Bridie are here because I heard so many people talking about how wonderful it was to work on their projects and what a great job they did as project managers. And the feedback for both of you was that people felt like the moment they joined that Discord or were onboarded onto this project, they knew that you knew what was going on, or at least gave the illusion that you were, and that they felt like it was just very organized. You had answers. You'd considered a bunch of things already, and that gave them a lot of confidence as part of those projects. Goodness gracious. Let's do last call for questions. I'm also going to scroll through because I feel like there was one. This is interesting, and actually an interesting question for the types of projects that you all have worked on. I Am Not Twitch had another question earlier, which was, is there a market within D&D for more role-play focused adventures, modules, rule editions? I've seen a fair few people ask about what to do about situations like this within D&D, but the most common answer is to recommend other systems. Do you feel D&D doesn't fit heavier focus on role-playing non-combat situations? So not necessarily related to collaborative projects, but maybe some of your particular collaborative projects, especially Eyes Unclouded.
Yeah, definitely. We had had a good amount of our adventures that were not necessarily combat focused, or potentially combat was like the least good option of what you had. I think it's definitely there. There are obviously lots of games that are very good at it, but I think if you want to play D&D, you can definitely make really great adventures focused around role-playing rather than combat. And lots of people are doing it at the minute. If you look on the DMsGuild, there are a growing number of people who are working on more RP-focused adventures and different ways to make your characters and such.
Yeah. I feel like I often bring up Eyes Unclouded as one of my favorite examples of that because I have noticed that growing on the DMs Guild. I feel like this community is always kind of more forward thinking to me than necessarily than other realms of like homebrew communities where folks are like, well, I want to see more homesteading type D&D content, and they just publish it and make it happen, which is really great. Another one that comes to mind that was a collaborative project, although with a smaller group, was the Domestic Adventurer's Handbook, or the Adventurer's Domestic Handbook. One of those. It's another really great one. Ashton, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's something to be said for the fact that D&D may not be the best game for every situation, but I have not found a better creator community so far. So I'm going to make D&D fit whatever I need it to fit, because I really enjoy the people that I work with, and I enjoy, one of the benefits of working with the DMs Guild is that you have access to the Wizards of the Coast intellectual property, just in case you really want a beholder. But you also have access to royalty sharing, which is not necessarily an option on every site. It is also on Drive-Thru RPG, obviously. But with the tools and the people, I'll make the roleplay work.
Another great question, and I think this will be our last question for this jam. Tree Stump 2K asks, where would you suggest starting for a novice? With practice writing, with solo work, or with collabs? What are your thoughts?
Again, I think checking out the RPG Writer Workshop is amazing for new people. It's got a great community, and it's just so helpful for going through everything you need to think about when making an adventure. So doing that, making a solo adventure that way, and just reading other people's things is a great resource as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jack, for dropping that link in chat. The RPG Writer Workshop is now a part of Storytelling Collective, so look them up. And what are your thoughts, Ashton?
I guess, so my thing is that if you are currently a DM, which you likely are, you're already writing. I don't necessarily think that you need practice. I think that really getting started on solo work or collabs is the best way that you're gonna improve, and you will improve. I look back at the first thing I make and go, ooh. And it's like the most popular thing that I've made solo, right? But it's still, you're going to improve. And the sooner you get on the path to improving, the better.
Absolutely. The hardest part of getting started publishing on DMs Guild is finishing your project and publishing it. Once you do that the first time, it gets a lot easier to work up the courage. I feel like the other part that's difficult, which is related to finishing your project, is limiting the scope of your first project. It's very easy to have, especially as a dungeon master, have this grand campaign in mind, but it takes a lot of work to write out like a level 1 through 20 adventure, and starting with like one scenario or like a level 1 encounter, or it doesn't even have to be a level 1 encounter, just an encounter, gets you publishing sooner so you can reiterate or work on your next piece sooner. And I do find limiting scope seems to be easier when you work on a collaborative project, because you're literally handed an assignment that you work on. That's one of the many pros to your first work being on a collaborative project as a writer or editor or whatever aspect you want to be involved in. All right. Goodness gracious. It is 10:59, so top of the next hour. This flew by. I loved hearing all of the wisdoms that you both had on Community Jam, so thank you so much for making time to join me to chit-chat about collaborative design today. Let's go ahead and do some outros. Let folks know, again, who you are, what projects you have going on, in case they missed the beginning, and also where they can find you. And we'll start with Bridie this time.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm Bridie. You can find me on Twitter at Bridie is Writing. That's Bridie. I was project lead for Eyes Unclouded, and you can find my first solo adventure on the DMs Guild as well. Currently working on a little indie game that may be coming for Zine Quest 3, hopefully, tentatively called Western Scandal. It's sort of like a Regency collaborative storytelling game, so we'll see, hopefully.
Let me live out Bridgerton.
Yeah.
I love that. Ashton.
So thanks for having me as well. I'm Ashton. You can find me on Twitter at Ashton N. Duncan. The N is important. I was the project manager on the Princess Project, my first solo project that I just slammed, but I promise it's okay, is the Summer Games. And I'm also editor on a couple things coming up. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll get info about those.
And I am Lysa Penrose, brand manager of Dungeon Masters Guild. If you want to follow Dungeon Masters Guild, hashtag DMsGuild or at DMs_guild on Twitter and Instagram. And we also have that Facebook group if you just look up Dungeon Masters Guild and page as well. If you'd like to follow me, it's at Lysa Penrose on Instagram, Twitter, and here on Twitch. I will be over on the D&D channel tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific time, making up for that DMs Guild Design Dash we missed last week. Very excited. I'm going to be joined by some awesome designers who I'm going to torment by making them write an encounter in 15 minutes. This is like the fun, gentle show, and then I stress everybody out with Design Dash. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, asking questions. This will be available as a VOD on YouTube later if you missed any bit of the show and want to catch up. And next week, at 10 a.m. Pacific time, right here, we're going to be doing our first Chat Ventures show, doing a solo D&D game where chat gets to help us adventure along. Until then, take care, everybody.